On June 10, 2025, after more than 30 years on death row, Anthony Floyd Wainwright was executed by lethal injection in Florida. In this video, we'll uncover what happened, his last meal, and his last words. It all started on April 27, 1994, when Carmen Gayheart didn't show up to pick up her two kids from daycare. She was 23 years old, a nursing student in Lake City, Florida, and a mother of two young children aged 5 and 3. But that afternoon, she disappeared without a trace. Just 2 days before Carmen vanished, 23-year-old Anthony Wainwright and 31-year-old Richard Hamilton broke out of a minimum security prison in Carteret County, North Carolina. Here, Anthony had been serving a 10-year sentence for burglary, while Richard was in for armed robbery, with 25 years to go. But neither of them planned to finish their time. After their escape, they stole a Cadillac and broke into a home where they took 2 rifles on their way out. Then they hit the road heading south to Florida, armed, dangerous, and ready to destroy anyone in their path. But the stolen car couldn't keep up. It overheated just outside Lake City, Florida, and Anthony and Richard were stranded. And that's when they saw her. Carmen was loading groceries into her Ford Bronco in a Winn-Dixie parking lot, about to pick up her children from daycare, and she never saw them coming. Richard and Anthony moved fast. They cornered her, pulled a gun, forced her into the Bronco, and took off north on I-75, out of town, out of reach. Behind a truck stop off State Route 6, deep in the woods, they dragged Carmen out of the car, and that's when both men assaulted her. When it was over, Anthony wrapped his hands around Carmen's throat and began to squeeze, and he didn't stop. But that wasn't enough for him. To make sure she was dead, he grabbed a .22 rifle and fired 2 shots into her head. Insurance, in his words. Then they left her there in the woods, like she meant nothing, and drove off. By the time her family realized she hadn't shown up to pick up the kids, alarm bells went off fast. Her husband, her father, and classmates all searched, but there was no sign of her. And by the end of the day, she was officially reported missing. The next day, April 28th, a trooper spotted Carmen's car in a quiet neighborhood near Brookhaven, Mississippi. Trooper John Leggett didn't know who he was tailing, not yet, but something felt off. Richard and Anthony were circling the streets in a stolen Bronco, and when they looped around again, John followed, quietly and at a distance. But it didn't take long for things to explode. Suddenly, shots rang out from the back of the stolen Bronco, and within seconds, John's windshield was lit up, blasted with more than 40 shotgun pellets. But John managed to follow them down a dead-end road near a local school, and when the Bronco stopped, John grabbed his shotgun and got ready. Then the SUV turned around, gaining speed and coming straight at him. But John didn't move. He didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot hit Richard in the face, and Anthony took a round in the shoulder. The Bronco veered off and crashed. And just like that, it was over. Both men were pulled from the wreck and taken into custody, bloodied but alive. When the dust settled, officers inspected the Ford Bronco. It was indeed the same SUV they'd used to flee Florida, but Carmen wasn't inside. She was still missing. After his arrest, Anthony dropped a bombshell. First, he told officers he had AIDS. Then he admitted something even worse. He said he assaulted Carmen after robbing and kidnapping her, knowing full well he was infected. But when it came to the murder, he pointed the blame at Richard, saying it was him who strangled and shot her. But Richard talked too and also gave a full confession. However, his story didn't match the story Anthony had told. He told detectives both he and Anthony had raped Carmen. Then he sketched out a rough map showing where they had left her body. Nothing precise, just a memory of a place buried deep in the woods, off any main road, remote and hidden. And in his version, Anthony was the one who pulled the trigger. A few days later, on May 2nd, 1994, a dispatcher named Tina Wheeler studied the hand-drawn map and recognized something. It looked like a stretch of woods near State Route 6 in Hamilton County. And before sunrise, 2 deputies, Mel Black and Albert Jones, headed out to take a look. Around 4:30 a.m., Albert caught a foul, unmistakable scent drifting through the trees. And by sunrise, they finally had found her. Carmen had been there for days, left in the brush, exposed to the heat, and badly decomposed. Her remains were taken to the District 4 medical examiner's office in Jacksonville. During the autopsy, Dr. Margarita Arusa noticed something disturbing. Carmen's body was missing several teeth and her hyoid bone, a small bone in the neck often broken in cases of strangulation. That's when investigators returned to the scene. After carefully combing the area, they found the missing teeth and the hyoid bone buried in the dirt. And that confirmed what they already knew. Carmen's final moments had been brutal. After his arrest in Mississippi, Anthony agreed to return to Florida willingly. Back in custody, prosecutors struck a deal with him and his lawyer. The state wouldn't seek the death penalty if he met 3 conditions. First, he had to prove he didn't take part in Carmen's murder. Second, he had to be fully honest with investigators. And third, he had to pass a polygraph. For nearly 2 weeks, between May 9th and May 20th, 1994, Anthony cooperated. He gave multiple statements and even helped investigators recover pieces of evidence tied to the case. But on May 20th, when he was brought to the state attorney's office, everything changed. After a brief talk with his lawyer, Anthony admitted, plainly for the first time, that he had assaulted Carmen. And when asked to take the lie detector test, he flat out refused. Then came the lab results. A DNA sample taken from bodily fluid on the backseat of Carmen's car matched his. Anthony and Richard were both charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, sexual battery, and robbery. And throughout the trial, neither Anthony nor Richard showed remorse. Richard sometimes even smirked and blew kisses, as if it were all a joke. In May 1995, 2 separate juries heard their cases, and both returned with death sentences. And the judge agreed. On June 12, 1995, the court didn't hold back. They called the crime pitiless and unnecessarily torturous, and also wicked, evil, and vile. Both men were sentenced to die in the electric chair, plus 3 life sentences for the rest of their crimes. For years, both men kept appealing the sentence every chance they got, but every court, state and federal, shut them down. Anthony even brought forward new DNA evidence, hoping for a change. But it wasn't enough. The facts still stood. Then, on January 13, 2023, the case quietly closed for one of them. Richard Hamilton died in prison of natural causes at the age of 59. The official cause of death was never made public, but after nearly 30 years on death row, his time ran out before the state ever carried out the sentence. Then, after spending more than 30 years on death row, Anthony's final day came. On the morning of June 10, 2025, he woke up around 3:30 a.m. inside Florida State Prison. Officials offered him a last meal, but he politely declined. He spent his last hours with 2 visitors, his fiancée, Samantha, and his spiritual advisor, Reverend Jeff Hood. But as the clock moved forward, so did his fear. According to the Reverend, Anthony was very afraid of what was coming. While strapped to the gurney, he was asked if he had any final words. Anthony turned to the victim's family first. "I hope my death brings you peace and healing," he said. But then his tone shifted. He called his court-appointed attorney Florida's worst and said the justice system in the state was broken beyond repair. "Please continue the fight," he told those opposing the death penalty, "because I can promise you they are not going to let up. They will continue to murder if we continue to let it happen." Most of his final words, though, were for his fiancée Samantha, the woman who had taken his last name, even though they were never legally married. "You are the love of my life. I'm so blessed we found each other," he told her. "The years we have spent together have been beyond wonderful. They have been downright magical. Love is stronger than death, and I know our love will last for eternity." The drug started flowing at 6:10 p.m. Anthony's shoulders shuddered once, then again. He blinked hard, pulled in a few sharp breaths, then stopped moving altogether. By 6:14, he lay completely still. At 6:22 p.m., he was pronounced dead. Anthony Floyd Wainwright was 54 years old.